Sometimes the person who hurts you is the only one who knows how to heal you. 15. His story begins in a quiet, almost suspended moment in time. Weeks have passed since their last conversation. Weeks filled with unread messages, unanswered calls, and silence that settled heavier than anger ever could. The younger male narrator reflects on those empty days, recounting how the absence felt like a room with all the air pulled out. He didn't just miss her presence. He missed the way she listened, the warmth of her eyes when she opened up, the gentle steadiness she always carried. But now, sitting alone at a corner table in a small cafe, he is unsure why she asked to meet. He's nervous, not dramatic, just unsettled, because part of him wants closure, and another part wants explanation. The age difference always lingered unspoken between them, but it was never the barrier he feared. Instead, it was the silence. The cafe atmosphere mirrors their emotional distance. Soft lamps casting golden pools of light, quiet jazz humming from unseen speakers, and the muted clatter of cups. He traces the rim of his mug absent-mindedly, steam curling upward like unfinished thoughts. The coldness between them feels out of place in such a warm setting. She arrives a moment later, pausing near the entrance before spotting him. Her presence is familiar yet changed, shoulders slightly tense, expression hesitant. She walks toward him with slow, measured steps, her heels soft on the wooden floor. When she sits, there's a space between them that feels enormous. They offer polite greetings, but their voices are subdued, careful. The narrator watches her hands as she wraps them around her cup, not for warmth, but for stability. Her thumb traces the ceramic surface repeatedly, a silent tell of nerves beneath her confident exterior. Their eyes meet briefly, then look away. The unspoken history fills the silence. The late-night talks about dreams, the supportive embraces during stressful days, and the stolen moments where their feelings felt undeniable. Yet now, sitting across from each other again, uncertainty rules every second. He wonders what exactly broke between them. Was it fear, avoidance, or something deeper neither dared to name? His heartbeat is steady but heavy, each thump echoing the unresolved tension. He senses she came with something she needs to say, but the words remain caught behind her lips. He tries to read her expression, the tightness around her eyes, the way her jaw clenches briefly before relaxing. She looks tired, not physically, but emotionally drained. The narrator feels a pang of empathy, but also frustration. He wants answers, but he also wants reassurance that this moment isn't too late. The narrator isn't angry. He's exhausted by waiting for clarity. The audience should feel that quiet ache, the discomfort of unresolved emotion. There is longing here, but buried under hurt. The keynote ends not with a conversation, but with anticipation. Every breath, every pause hints that something important lies beneath the silence. The tension must simmer, not explode, setting the stage for gradual emotional unraveling. The goal of this first part is to pull the viewer into the subtle discomfort, making them lean in to hear the words neither character is ready to speak. The air between them shifts subtly, almost imperceptibly, as the initial awkwardness gives way to something more fragile, the possibility of vulnerability. The narrator watches her eyes, searching for intention. He knows her well enough to notice the small signs, her hesitations, the pauses between breaths, the deliberate way she chooses her words when something weighs heavily on her mind. She starts by asking how he's been, but her tone is distant, unfocused, as if the question carries 100 unspoken meanings. He answers politely, voice steady, yet there's tension beneath his calm exterior. He doesn't want to make things harder, but he also doesn't want to pretend he hasn't been hurting. She takes a slow sip of her drink, inhaling before she speaks again. Her gaze drifts to the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. It's a gentle distraction, something safe to look at instead of the truth sitting across from her. The narrator senses the shift. This isn't small talk. She's searching for a way to begin. He leans forward slightly, elbows resting loosely on the table. It's not a confrontational posture, more like an invitation. He wants her to speak, to share whatever it is that pulled her back after weeks of silence. Her hands tremble faintly when she sets her cup down. She folds them together in her lap, fingers tightening for a moment before relaxing. She mentions stress at work, pressure from family, feeling overwhelmed. The words come slowly, threaded with exhaustion. But he hears something beneath the surface. Her voice cracks subtly on certain phrases. She doesn't look at him when she talks about shutting down or withdrawing. It's clear these excuses aren't the real reasons. More like warm-up disclosures, testing whether it's safe to be honest. He nods, letting her continue uninterrupted. The narrator's internal struggle becomes a quiet current. He wants to ask if she regrets leaving, but he isn't ready to face the answer. Silence falls again, but it's lighter than before. Not empty, anticipatory. She exhales shakily, eyes flicking to meet his before dropping back down. Her shoulders slope forward slightly, as though she's carrying something heavy across her chest. The narrator grips his coffee cup, fingers tightening unconsciously. He senses a shift happening, a loosening of walls she once reinforced. It stirs conflicting emotions. Hope, fear, resentment softened by longing. She admits, barely above a whisper, that she pushed him away because everything felt too complicated. The phrase hangs in the air like smoke, hazy and difficult to grasp. His heartbeat quickens, but he remains still. Inside, he's processing, not accusing, not reassuring, simply absorbing this first thread of truth. The crack in the emotional barrier has opened, but what lies behind it is still hidden. The audience should feel the tension beginning to thaw, even if only slightly. There's no sudden relief, just the slow unfurling of vulnerability. Every gesture, every waver in her voice shows that her walls are weakening. This moment is not about answers, but about readiness. The first fragile step toward confronting the wounds they've avoided. The rain outside grows steadier, streaking the windows like quiet tears neither of them will shed yet. In the dim cafe light, the narrator notices how her eyes aren't just tired. They're haunted by something deeper, something she's been trying to hold back. He senses an unspoken confession approaching, carried in the way she traces patterns on the table with her fingertip, like she's searching for courage within the motion. The silence wraps around them, not cold anymore, but charged with the weight of buried truth. She shifts in her chair, crossing her legs slowly, her posture tightening for a moment before softening. He leans back slightly, giving her space, not physical distance but emotional permission. He wants to hear her, truly hear her, even if it hurts. Finally, she whispers that things weren't just complicated. They were terrifying, not because of him, but because of what their relationship meant in the world outside their private moments. The narrator feels his chest constrict, not from rejection, but from understanding the fear she couldn't articulate before. She talks about the judgment she imagined. Co-workers whispering, friends questioning her intentions, family wondering if she was selfish for choosing happiness despite expectations. The age difference, though only numbers, suddenly becomes heavy in her voice. The narrator listens silently, heart pounding a slow, painful rhythm. He had sensed her distancing, but hearing the reasons illuminates the shadows he'd been lost in. Her vulnerability cracks open wider, exposing the fear that guided her retreat. Not a lack of feeling, but too much feeling paired with uncertainty. Her gaze meets his, and this time it lingers. The contact sends a quiet tremor through him. He sees guilt behind her eyes, not regret of loving him, but regret of running from it. When her knee brushes his under the table, it happens so lightly he wonders if it was accidental. But she doesn't move away immediately. The contact is subtle, yet it vibrates with longing. An unspoken plea for connection even as she confesses why she severed it. She raises a hand as if to reach for him, then pulls it back halfway, fingers curling toward her palm. The hesitation is almost tender in its honesty. The narrator feels heat stir beneath his sternum. Not anger, but aching empathy. He realizes he wasn't the only one hurting in the silence. She carried her fears alone, protecting him in her own misguided way. The cafe noise drifts further into the background, fading against the intensity of their shared focus. He leans forward slightly, voice softer than before, asking why she didn't trust him with her fear. Her lips part, breath catching. She admits she didn't want him to feel pressure, didn't want to make him choose between her and the comfort of simplicity. The confession lands heavy, transforming their emotional distance into a vulnerable closeness neither expected. This moment shifts the story's axis. The audience should feel the tangle of longing and pain tightening, hinting at both danger and possibility. The truth opens a door, not fully, but enough to let hope flicker in the dark. The turning point arrives not with raised voices, but with quiet honesty that stings far deeper. The narrator sits frozen for a beat, absorbing the truth she has finally exposed. Fear, not indifference, drove her withdrawal. That realization softens some of his resentment, but the wound remains tender, raw. A soft thunder rumbles outside, a reminder of the storm building both inside and out. The cafe's warm light cannot dull the ache that settles between them now, the ache of truths finally brought into the open. He inhales slowly, tries to steady his voice before speaking. She notices his jaw tighten, the subtle clench that reveals more emotion than words could. Her breathing is uneven, shallow. She's bracing herself. She knows there is more to confess, more that she cannot avoid now that the dam has cracked. He asks her, quietly, but with trembling sincerity, why she left without explanation instead of trusting him to face the fear with her. Her eyes flicker with surprise, then regret. She looks down at her hands, fingers fidgeting, then forcing themselves still. Her voice wavers as she explains she thought leaving him abruptly would make it easier for him to move on. That severing ties cleanly was kinder than admitting the truth. She wanted him but was terrified of what that desire required of her. The narrator swallows hard, throat tight. The words land like small blows, each one understandable yet deeply painful. The belief that he needed protection from his own feelings wounds him, because it denies his agency. And then, the line that fractures the moment. She whispers, "I never meant to break us." Her voice cracks just enough to reveal she's been holding those words, rehearsing them, fearing them. She finally lifts her gaze to meet his eyes. The sincerity there is overwhelming, raw, unfiltered. He exhales a long, controlled breath. His voice is steady, but tinged with hurt. "But you did." The simplicity of the response makes it even sharper. The distance in his tone isn't cold. It's honest grief. He isn't punishing her. He's acknowledging the reality they both tried to ignore. Silence crashes down between them like a wave. Not empty but dense, thick with the collision of vulnerability and pain. She flinches slightly, a tiny physical response she can't control. Her eyes glisten, though the tears remain unshed. He looks away, gazing toward the rain-smeared window. Reflections blur, obscuring the world outside the cafe, mirroring how their future now feels uncertain. The emotion tightening in his chest is complex. Love tangled with betrayal, longing battling caution. She places her hand on the table between them, palm open, not reaching but offering. Her fingers tremble visibly now. It's not a plea for instant forgiveness, but a gesture acknowledging responsibility. The narrator hesitates, staring at her hand but not moving. That hesitation is crucial. It conveys everything. He isn't ready, but something within him still leans toward her. Toward understanding, toward hope. This moment marks the peak emotional tension of the story. A confrontation rooted not in accusation, but in truth finally voiced. The consequences of silence now settle fully, urging both characters to decide what comes next. The silence following his words, "But you did," lingers like a bruise. It isn't a silence of rejection, but rather a space where the truth can settle, where the rawness finally has room to breathe. The narrator feels the weight of what he said, yet doesn't regret speaking it. Some truths are necessary, even when they wound. For a moment, neither of them moves. The rain keeps tapping the windows, a steady, rhythmic reminder of time continuing outside their emotional storm. The warmth of the cafe's lamps casts gentle shadows across their faces, softening edges that moments ago felt jagged. She draws a slow, shaky breath, steadying herself. Her gaze lifts from her open palm on the table to meet his eyes, searching for anger or bitterness. Instead, she finds something quieter. Hurt, yes, but also longing, conflicted affection, and hesitation. Her voice barely reaches him when she asks if there's any chance, any path, to rebuild what was broken. The question hangs between them, delicate and trembling. She's not demanding reassurance. She's acknowledging uncertainty. She knows forgiveness cannot be rushed. The narrator inhales deeply, letting the question settle in his chest. His emotions swirl, resentment softening into empathy, longing growing roots again, fear whispering cautions. His fingers twitch near the edge of his cup. He wants to reach for her hand. The instinct is strong, familiar. But trust, once fractured, needs more than instinct. He responds slowly, words forming carefully. He admits he's still hurting, that the silence cut deeper than she realizes. Yet he also confesses he never stopped thinking about her, never let go fully. His voice is steady, but vulnerability threads through it. A quiet tremor of truth. Her eyes brighten with a fragile hope. She leans closer, elbows resting lightly on the table, closing some of the distance between them. The slight movement feels monumental. Her shoulders relax just a fraction, relief flowing through her like a quiet exhale. She reaches forward, slow, deliberate. Her fingertips brush against his knuckles. The touch is feather-light, as if afraid to break whatever thread holds them together. It's not possession, not insistence, just presence. A silent apology through warm skin meeting skin. The narrator doesn't pull away, but he doesn't fully take her hand either. He lets her touch linger, exploring the warmth of her fingers, feeling the tremor of sincerity beneath them. His breath catches, soft, almost imperceptible. The contact sparks memories. Late-night conversations when her hand rested on his arm. Quiet mornings with shared silence. The way she squeezed his hand when no one was looking. Those memories return not as nostalgia, but as a reminder of the connection that once felt unbreakable. He finally whispers that if they try again, things must change. They cannot repeat old patterns, cannot hide fear behind silence. She nods, tears pooling but not falling. Her expression is not desperate, but resolute. She is ready to work for what she almost lost. The audience should feel that painful yet hopeful shift. Love wounded but alive, trust fragile but reachable. The emotional tone warms just enough to hint at healing, while still honoring the pain that must be acknowledged before true reconciliation can beg. The fragile warmth created by that hesitant touch grows, not suddenly, but slowly, like a match struggling to stay lit in the rain. The narrator watches her fingers resting lightly against his, noticing how she's no longer trembling. She seems steadier now that the truth is out, as though the act of speaking the fear was itself a release. He shifts his hand slightly, not yet holding hers fully, but aligning their fingers, an instinctive movement toward connection. The rain outside softens into a gentler pattern, as if echoing the emotional easing between them. They begin to talk, not to revisit old wounds, but to explore what wounded them in the first place. The narrator admits that her disappearing without explanation shattered his trust. He shares how he replayed every moment, searching for signs he missed. His tone isn't accusing. It's raw honesty, offered not as ammunition but as invitation. She listens, eyes fixed on him with undivided attention. Her breath deepens, shoulders rising and falling in slow, deliberate intervals. Every part of her posture communicates presence, a willingness to stay in discomfort rather than escape it. She confesses that in her fear, she convinced herself she was protecting him. From judgment, from her past, from complications. But she now realizes that by making the choice alone, she denied them both the chance to face it together. Her voice cracks when she admits she underestimated him. Not his love, but his strength. The narrator feels a soft ache bloom in his chest. Her words land as both apology and affirmation. He feels seen, not as a young man she needed to shield, but as a partner capable of carrying emotional weight beside her. He turns his hand, slowly curling his fingers around hers. The gesture is deliberate, an act of acceptance, not impulse. Her breath catches, eyes widening slightly before softening into quiet relief. Their joined hands rest between them, warm and steady. They speak of boundaries, not rules but agreements. Transparency, communication, the courage to voice fears instead of swallowing them. The narrator admits his own fault. He sensed her fear but avoided confronting it, hoping silence would resolve the tension. He realizes now that silence is what broke them. This shared accountability marks a turning point. The emotional terrain shifts from pain to possibility. The heaviness between them doesn't disappear, but transforms into something manageable, an obstacle they can face rather than a barrier keeping them apart. They sit closer, bodies angled subtly inward. She leans just slightly toward him, not in desperation, but openness. He notices how her eyes shine, not with tears, but with cautious hope. The moment becomes a quiet pact. They don't promise forever or perfection. Instead, they choose honesty and effort, the foundations of rebuilding trust. The narrator gently brushes his thumb along the side of her hand, a small gesture that carries the emotional resonance of commitment. She responds with a soft squeeze, her fingers grounding him. The audience should feel the shift. The storm inside them begins to calm. The cracks in their connection are acknowledged, but no longer feared. The decision to try again isn't dramatic. It's intimate, steady, rooted in mutual understanding. This part closes with the sense of a new beginning forged from shared vulnerability and earned trust. A fragile but real step toward healing together. The cafe has grown quieter, the afternoon stretching toward evening. Outside, the rain has faded to a gentle drizzle, leaving the streets glistening under soft lamplight. The narrator and she rise from the table, moving slowly, their steps unhurried, as if each movement is an acknowledgement of the care and caution now woven into their connection. Walking side by side, there's a tangible closeness that had been impossible during their weeks of silence. Their shoulders nearly brush, but neither forces the contact. It is natural, organic. Each step carries a rhythm of tentative trust rebuilt, a silent agreement that the past no longer dictates the present. They speak softly, voices mingling with the muted city sounds, sharing small observations about the world around them. A stray cat crossing the street, the scent of rain-soaked earth, the flicker of lights in shop windows. It is mundane conversation, but it is infused with the intimacy of survival together. Every word exchanged is a stitch in the fabric they are mending, every laugh a small but meaningful thread of reconnection. The narrator notices the subtle changes in her posture. Her shoulders relaxed, her head held a little higher, a quiet ease replacing the tension that had shadowed her every movement. She looks at him, eyes warm and unguarded, and he feels the years of fear, guilt, and hesitation fall away in small increments. Finally, she reaches for his hand, not hesitating this time. Their fingers intertwine, not in desperation or need, but in agreement. The touch is grounding, reassuring, a tangible manifestation of the trust they are consciously rebuilding. He feels her thumb brushing gently over his knuckles, a quiet affirmation that they are present for one another, moment by moment. As they pause near a street lamp, he presses his cheek lightly against the side of her head. The gesture is intimate but not overwhelming. It is a quiet declaration that he is here, that he will stay, that he understands the fragility of what they are trying to nurture. She leans into the gesture, closing her eyes for a moment, drawing strength from the warmth of his presence. Their conversation turns to the future, not in plans, promises, or certainty, but in the language of possibility. They acknowledge that rebuilding will take time, that mistakes may be made, that fears may resurface. Yet they choose to move forward together, consciously and carefully, aware of both the fragility and the depth of what they share. The narrator reflects on how different this moment feels compared to weeks ago. No tension, no unspoken blame, no silent walls separating them. Instead, there is understanding, acceptance, and a shared commitment to honesty. As they continue walking, the city lights glint off puddles, casting a shimmering reflection beneath their feet. Their shadows overlap, merging, yet still distinct, symbolic of two individuals choosing togetherness without losing their individuality. The audience should feel a sense of closure that is neither simplistic nor rushed. The story does not promise perfection, but it delivers authenticity. Two people acknowledging the pain, embracing vulnerability, and deliberately choosing to move forward together. The story ends on a note of mindful connection, a gentle, warm resolution. They are together, fully aware of the challenges that may come, but confident in their mutual willingness to face them. It is a quiet, lasting intimacy, built not on fantasy, but on trust, understanding, and the conscious decision to rebuild what was broken.